The Raspberry Pi is a brilliant little device. I mean, even in a pretty decent sized case, it's still relatively small. And we all know how much of an awesome maker board it is. I've even made it into a home server on this channel before, so it definitely has potential. And as we've seen over the years, their officially supported operating system, formerly Raspbian, now Raspberry Pi OS, has turned more and more into an actual working desktop operating system. So that begs the question, can you actually daily drive a Raspberry Pi for an extended period of time? Well, unfortunately, that's what I'm here to find out. And for the next 7 days, I will be daily driving this Raspberry Pi 4 8GB version. Let me know down in the comments how you think this is going to go. Okay, so the Raspberry Pi I'm using is the Raspberry Pi 4 8GB version, just to give me as much of a chance as reasonably possible. I'm using the Argon 1 case, which connects a M.2 SATA drive and lets me boot off of it. So again, giving me the best kind of chance of having a decent operating system or desktop experience. I'll be running the 64-bit version of Raspberry Pi OS. I've previously messed around with running Ubuntu desktop on the Raspberry Pi, and I just didn't really have a great experience. It seems like things that are supported on native Ubuntu don't necessarily translate well to the Raspberry Pi, and when you're looking up things for the Raspberry Pi, a lot of times it comes up in Raspberry Pi OS, which doesn't always translate well to Ubuntu, so I'm sticking with Raspberry Pi OS. So let me clarify one thing. I'm obviously not saying you should use a Raspberry Pi as a desktop replacement. Nobody in the history of the world has ever suggested that. For the price of this setup right here, which is probably around $100, $120, maybe even more, you can get a pretty decent desktop system off of Craigslist or eBay that'll be miles better than this. But we're doing it just to see if we can do it and maybe learn something along the way. So this is day one. All I want to do today is get everything set up, configured, kind of test out the basics, web browsing, checking emails, you know, how fast it is, how snappy it is, just regular use cases. So that's what we're going to do. Let's hook it up. So I will be using this 4K monitor. I don't anticipate running this in 4K. I'll probably drop it down to 1080p. But that's the idea. Okay, so here we are in Raspberry Pi OS 64-bit, and I've done a couple of things. I've installed the Argon script to get the fan working. I've lowered the resolution to 1080p. It gives it a much better experience, 1080p at 60 versus 4K at 30. I've tested around basic web browsing functionality, and initial impressions are basically, you know, those dreams that people have where you're running from something and it just feels like you're trying to run fast, but you're actually running super slow. That's what this feels like in comparison to an actual desktop machine or one that I'm used to. So I have all my bookmarks reset up because in Chromium, Google cut out the functionality to be able to sign into your Gmail account or Google account to be able to link everything and transfer over all the bookmarks and settings. So YouTube playback, I know that's one of the biggest issues we've seen a lot when people use Raspberry Pis as desktop replacement, is video playback. It's honestly not terrible. Let's watch Mr. Beast's ridiculous Squid Game video. So you can see, like, it just takes a little while to do almost everything. So as you can see, I mean, that loaded up pretty quickly. So here we are in 720p, and we are getting some pretty decent playback. I mean, I don't see many dropped frames at all. It's pretty smooth, which probably is just a testament to Raspberry Pi OS updates. I believe recently they said they were working on video playback, especially in web browsing and YouTube, so pretty solid. I mean, for a week, I can live with 720p YouTube playback for sure. If we get a full screen and turn on stats for nerds, we can see how much we're actually dropping. So up here we can see we are running at 720p, 24 FPS. and 145 frames dropped out of 3000. It doesn't look like it's going up very much at all. It's sticking at 145, so pretty smooth playback outside of full screen. Let's just browse some web pages. Let's pull up a bunch of different tabs, see how it reacts. Let's try Twitch. Let's open up my Discord. Shameless plug, if you haven't joined the Discord, feel free to join. Link is in the description below. But yeah, you can just tell everything is just slower. And it reminds me of when I was younger, back in the 90s, when, you know, this was normal for a computer and how fast you expected it to go. So PTSD flashbacks, I guess. But so far, usable. Definitely usable. Obviously, it's not going to be as fast as a normal computer. But I don't have many plans for today, day one. I just want to get everything set up and ready to go. Over the course of this week, I'm going to be testing regular office work, so like spreadsheets, Word documents. I want to test if I can game on it, what type of games I can realistically play on here. I want to test some type of development work, so any type of coding you want to do. The big ones are going to be, this entire video that you're watching has been edited off of this Raspberry Pi. So if you're looking at this and the quality sucks and it's not as good as my other videos, that's because this entire video was edited directly off of the Raspberry Pi, as well as the thumbnail was edited on the Raspberry Pi as well. So everything for this video, Raspberry Pi. But that's day one. Those are my ideas. I will see you tomorrow. Oh, okay. Day two. And while this is booting up, let's recap day one, or at least talk about my thoughts. So day one obviously was just installing Raspberry Pi OS and doing the basic web browsing stuff. After I stopped filming, I pretty much spent the rest of the day watching LSU versus Texas A&M, hanging out on Discord, watching YouTube. Nothing too crazy, and it was a decent experience, so can't complain. The installation process for Raspberry Pi and Linux in general is so much better than Windows. Windows, you know, takes a lot longer. You know, you're going through a process. They have to ask you, you know, your name, your email address, your mom's maiden name, complimenting you on your green shirt, pretty much creeping you out, getting as much details from you as possible. Linux, Raspberry Pi is like, here you go. So day two, what are we going to do? The idea for day two is to do office tasks or basic work tasks. So that involves, you know, spreadsheets, Word documents, answering and replying to emails, maybe some Zoom calls. That's what we're going to do today, and I know what you're thinking. Office tasks should be easy. You can just use, you know, the Google Suite, like Google Sheets, Google Documents, or you can use Office 365 from Microsoft and get all the Words and Excels and blah, blah, blah. But yes, while you can do that, what happens if you don't have internet and you want to work offline? So we're going to use some native softwares for Linux and see if they work on the Raspberry Pi, and if they do, how well they work. So that's the idea. Let's check it out. Okay, so I found a list here, 17 best apps to use. It's a weird number, but for email, we're going to try this. We're going to try Thunderbird. We're going to download Visual Studio Code while we're at it for development work. And for Office, we're going to try Libre Office. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so we installed Libre Office. One of my favorite things about Linux and obviously the Raspberry Pi is installing software is so much easier. I've added it, and it looks like there's a bunch of different things. LibreOffice Base, which is like databases, so I guess that's like Microsoft Access. Calc looks like Excel. Draw is what, like Paint or something. Impress is PowerPoint. Math is I don't know. And Writer, I guess, is like Word. So I guess let's try out the Excel variant and see what that's all about. Okay, so right off the bat, I mean, it looks like Excel for sure, but from like Windows XP or something. So I put an actual Excel document out here on my network share. I'm gonna see if we can actually open up Excel documents in here. If we can, that would be cool. Oh wow, so you can. You can straight up open Excel documents in here. Okay, that makes things interesting. So now we have a regular SLX folder or file. So then I can go over here and be like, this equals this. Or actually just do a concat. Can we do a concat? Concat. Yep, I mean it works like Excel. So cool. Let's try out the others. Okay, so here we are in Libre Writer, and we are seeing a theme here in terms of UI. It's basically late 90s, early 2000s, and it's basically a boost of nostalgia right to the dome. If you weren't born by that time, then consider this a time machine. So yeah, it looks like old Microsoft Word. So again, we're going to test. I have, let's refresh this. Okay, so similar to the Excel test, we have a doc and a docx file. Let's drag them in, see if they work. Here's the doc file. Yep, it worked. That's impressive. So all your doc files will work. Let's create a new and try docx. I assume it's going to work. Maybe not. Okay, so it looks like doc works, but docx doesn't work. Isn't really a huge deal, I don't think. Some of you that are more used to working with Microsoft Word, let me know if that's actually a big deal, but it doesn't appear that docx works with LibreOffice Writer. But hey, not bad. So, I mean, it's just like Microsoft Word. If you're used to using that, then I'm sure you could get used to using this. It's not as pretty, but who cares? Yeah, I don't really know what else to test. I mean, yep, you can change colors. Yep, you can do pretty much, it looks like a whole bunch of stuff. Add symbols, line breaks, page numbers, headers, footers, pictures, tables. It has spell check. So it doesn't like boy, it suggests boo. Let's go with that. Yeah, Microsoft Word replacement. Okay, so you get the point here. I'm not going to go through all the LibreOffice programs. That's not really what this video is about. The basics, Excel and Microsoft Word, showing that you can take those files that you were previously working on in Windows, and if you switch to a Raspberry Pi, you could import those into LibreOffice and work with them just as you would on Windows, kind of. Next, we're going to move on to Thunderbird client and see how that handles email. Okay, so I'm in Thunderbird and kind of following a trend here with these softwares. Looks like a dated version of Outlook, but I've set up one of my RAID email accounts, and I mean, yeah, here's my emails. What I did notice that's kind of weird is that when I immediately set it up, I got a Microsoft Outlook test message. So I don't know what that really means here, but when you set up something in Thunderbird, it sends you a Microsoft Outlook test message. But yeah, here's the emails. It's taking a little bit to load. Looks pretty normal. Floor lamp inquiry. We want you to review a floor lamp. No. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to go through, if you're used to Outlook, and set up all your rules again. Can you even do that here? Yeah, I'm not seeing. There's themes. Dark mode. Oh yeah. Okay, again, this isn't a review of software. This is basically like, are they good enough to use? So you've done your spreadsheets, you've created some Word documents, you have your email checked and sent and ready to go. Now you need to hop on a Zoom call with your boss, coworkers, lovers. So let's test out that. I think I have to find a webcam. Okay, update. I can't find my webcam, so I'm ordering one right now on Amazon. A nice $22 webcam. That's the one I'm going with. Looks like a webcam. Is it gonna focus? Yep. $22. It says it'll arrive today. There's no way. If it does, that would be very impressive. I don't believe that. I will update you guys tomorrow on
getting Zoom set up and doing kind of a video conference call on the Raspberry Pi. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to do some office related things, and I will give you guys either an update later today or tomorrow before we start day 3, which will probably be the gaming day. So that'll be tomorrow. In the meantime, I will continue to mess around with some office things and keep you guys updated. All right, so it's later in the day. I downloaded VS Code and I took a shot at doing some coding. Now, my actual job does a lot of coding in .NET, which is probably the worst thing to pick up for a Raspberry Pi. So I tried installing the C# plugin for VS Code or extension, and it's just not supported. I tried some workarounds to get any type of debugging going on here. It did not work. I could develop on here and then debug it on another machine, but at that point, there's really no point to doing that here. So, but if you want to use Python or something else, then you're more than welcome to develop on a Pi. Everybody knows that you can develop Python on a Raspberry Pi. But yeah, I didn't really expect everything to go smoothly. So, all right, day 3. It's actually about 5 p.m. now. I had a lot of work to do today. Actually, I was in training, but anyway, recap of day 2. Regular office tasks, they worked fine. I messed with some coding a bit and obviously couldn't get .NET working on it, but Python is going to be good to go. Other web-based programming that you want to do is probably going to be fine. But yeah, remember how I said we wanted to try Zoom? I got in my $20 webcam here, and first impressions are that it looks every bit of those $20 that I spent on it. So we have Zoom up, and I'm in a conference call with my boss. Hello. How does it sound? How does it look?
Pretty normal.
Does it really sound decent? Because the microphone's coming.
It sounds pretty good.
It's coming from my webcam. Okay, so how does it look though? If I move around.
I mean,
not great.
It's a little bit laggy.
I mean, this is certainly doable. If I entered a conference call with this setup, would you fire me? I'll take that as a no. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna hang up now and get back to work. Okay, so there you have it. Zoom works. The classic work from home setup can be done with a Raspberry Pi. Not that I figured it wouldn't, but honestly it was super easy. Zoom works in a web browser. Webcam just plugs in and auto detects. So day 3, I said it was going to be gaming. So the first thing we're going to do is fire up The Witcher 3. Just kidding. But I did actually try to play some AAA titles using Parsec, but there's no dedicated Parsec app for the Raspberry Pi 4. There is one for the Raspberry Pi 3, but not for the 4, and there is no indication that that's ever coming. But Parsec does have a web app. I tried that. It was not good at all, not playable at all, so we're doing away with Parsec. Maybe some other streaming service works, but Parsec's my main one, and that didn't seem to work. But what the Pi does do well is emulation. So we're going to download some emulators and some ROMs that we legally own, and I will test those out. So at the moment, I'm following this tutorial to get RetroPie installed on my Pi alongside Raspberry Pi OS, because I don't want to get rid of Raspberry Pi OS. I want it to kind of run alongside of each other. So I'm using the guide directly off of retropie.org.uk, and so far so good. I guess we can just pick, I don't know, let's just do the basic install. Whew, okay, it got hot. Let me take a minute while this is installing to say that, yes, I know a lot of these things people knew you could do. A lot of these things that I'm doing, people knew you couldn't do. There's a lot of things out there that I'm not testing, but this is 7 straight days of using this. I'm showing you my experience with it. I'm trying to go through situations that I would use it in on a daily basis, situations that I wouldn't necessarily always use on a daily basis but want to fit in the video. I know other people's workflow is completely different, and you're probably thinking, oh, well, he can't run this, he didn't test this. I can't possibly test every single thing and I apologize for that. I know this video is already going to be super long, and talking to future me who's editing this video on this thing, let me know how it is right here, between 1 out of 10. Yeah, I know a lot of these things seem simple, but the big tests are going to come with photo editing and video editing, because I think those are two things that nobody really does on the Raspberry Pi, and I'm interested to see how that's going to work out. Okay, I got cold again. This has been awful. I've tried multiple times to install RetroPie, and I keep getting the same error. Seems to be common on the Raspberry Pi 4. Cannot successfully build SDL2 and some other stuff. Just doesn't work. Every time I try to build it, it takes like an hour at least. So installing that's not working. I'm going with a different solution, Laka, but it's late, and I'm going to try to get that installed, and then this will flow over into the next day. But this has been a huge failure. All right, day 4, and I am so not having a good time right now. I tried to look up to see if Laka could be installed in a desktop environment, and it can't. My only solution was with RetroPie, and that doesn't work apparently with the Bullseye version of Raspberry Pi OS as of the date that I'm making this video. So if you're watching this in the future and it is available, cool. It wasn't available for me. Gaming on the Raspberry Pi 4 in a desktop environment, not great. Yes, I know I could dual boot and run RetroPie on its own separate hard drive, but that takes away from the point of this being a desktop test for the Raspberry Pi. I'm using this in the desktop environment, not dual booting 2 different OSs. So basically I'm stuck with browser games. So yeah, Neopets it is. So the next 3 days, I guess, I will be focusing on the video and photo editing aspect of this, and I assume that this is going to be worse than everything else combined. So fingers crossed. If you're seeing this video on YouTube, that means I successfully did it, but I am guaranteeing that it wasn't fun. So last ditch effort at gaming, I'm going with the x86 emulation using Box x86, I believe it's called. Yeah, so that is currently compiling right now. I'm going to run it, and hopefully we can get some type of games working. I can't go down without having something work. All right, I'm giving up. I'm throwing in the towel. I've tried using Box 86. It doesn't work at all with Bullseye. Trying Wine. I've tried installing Steam. I've tried following guides for the Raspberry Pi 4 specifically. Nothing works. Steam got close, but I got an error. Something about Steam UI.so, unable to locate. Looked it up. It's just some like generic error for installation. And basically, if you want a game on a Raspberry Pi, either just use RetroPie or something, play on that on its own boot disk, or use a Raspberry Pi 3, because it seems like everything is supported for the Raspberry Pi 3, or just don't use Bullseye, the new version of Raspberry Pi OS. So yeah, this has been a huge failure. Okay, I have a confession to make. It's actually day 7, the last day of the challenge. Now, you're wondering where day 5 and 6 went. Well, honestly, I didn't do too much on day 5 and 6. I was so demoralized from not being able to basically play any games that I just kind of used the Pi as normal. Web browsing, YouTube, hanging out on Discord, normal stuff. And I've also started the process of editing this video, which you can see right here. And shockingly, it's not terrible. I'm going to get into my actual thoughts with editing. I'm using kdenlive, and my initial kind of hypothesis was that there's absolutely zero chance I was going to be able to edit a video on a Raspberry Pi, but it seems like I'm actually going to be able to do it. So cool. So here we are in kdenlive. You can see I have quite a few clips loaded into the timeline. This is pretty much days 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I've already started piecing together and doing my A-cuts of the initial footage. And it's doable. Obviously, I've created proxies of my clips. So when I'm importing the clips, it's automatically creating proxies, which are lower resolution versions of the original, so that I can edit off of those. And that is surprisingly doable. And it doesn't take too long to create the proxies. I accidentally filmed in 4K once, and that took a while, but at 1080p, it's not bad. So you can see I'm scrubbing, and I mean, yeah, that's not too shabby. And I click play. It takes about 5 seconds, but after that, it's playing in real time. I've lowered the resolution to 360p because obviously the lower the resolution, the easier it is going to be to play. If I bump it back up to 720p, I think it might struggle a bit. So this is at 720p and we're getting a lot of skipping. Can't handle that. So my plan for the rest of today is to try to get the first 4 days cut and edited, maybe throw in some special effects and see how that works.
Boom!
And once that is done, I will get back to you guys with kind of a full review of editing on the Raspberry Pi and using kdenlive. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and import those last 2 clips that I filmed, and we're going to see how long it takes to create those proxies. So these are 400 megabyte and 800 megabyte clips, 1080p. Those are 1 minute and 10 second and 2 minute and 15 seconds. So let's start a timer. We're actually about, what, 10 seconds late. Two minutes and roughly 30 seconds for the 2 minute and 15 second clip. That's also while it was doing a proxy at the same time as the 1 minute and 10 second clip. So not bad for a 1080p clip. Yeah, 1080p making proxies for kdenlive. You're looking at about, for a single clip, maybe 20 to 30% over the actual time of the clip. So if you're looking at a 1 minute clip, it's probably going to take about 1 minute and 20 seconds, 1 minute and 15 seconds to make a proxy for it at 1080p. Not bad. Definitely makes it easy to work with. So if you're going to edit at all, you're going to have to make proxies. So yeah. All right, the video is relatively complete, and this has been by far the most pleasant experience of this entire week. And if you would have told me that were the case, that editing on the Raspberry Pi was going to be the best experience I had this week, I would have said you were lying. But apparently that's the case. After making proxies of the videos and turning down the render resolution to 360p, it's actually very, very usable. Obviously, you're not going to get the same type of quality and ease of use of other programs like DaVinci or Final Cut or Premiere Pro, but on a Raspberry Pi, this by far exceeded expectations. However, my thumbnail has been awful to work with. I'm using GIMP to create the thumbnail, and it's following the theme of this entire week. It just looks like an older version of like Photoshop or something. And it has some features that, you know, make it usable. You can adjust saturation, you know, you can do your curves and whatnot. But like masking on here is awful. Making adjustments and then undoing them or adjusting or making edits to your adjustments after you've done them is awful. So this is what I came up with. I'm not super happy with it, but with what I'm working with, it's passable. But yeah, that's it. I mean, I'll kind of walk through what I've done with the thumbnail. I'm going to do it really quick because I know this video is super long and it's not that entertaining. I just edited it and it's not one of my best videos, but oh well. All right, here is what we started with. I did some cropping and I took down the resolution of it a bit because working with a 48 megapixel photo is not the best on a Raspberry Pi, so I took the resolution down. I then added some saturation to it, adjusted the color, it was a little too red. I brightened up the Pi itself a little bit. I smoothed out some of these bumps down here with the stamp tool, the clone stamp tool. What did I do here? I made some blur to the background. I added my text, and you can't just add stroke apparently. You have to do some roundabout ass backwards way of adding stroke. So I did that with some drop shadow. Same thing with this. And that's it. Not much to it, but it was not a pleasant experience. I cannot wait to get back to Photoshop. And that's it. It has been a week of using the Pi, so that only leaves one thing left to do. 1 second. Ooh, okay. Let's wrap this up. Now, let me make one thing perfectly clear. I am not an expert in Linux. I am not some super guru when it comes to anything Linux or anything Raspberry Pi, but I do consider myself, above average when it comes to tech. Now, I know I'm certainly not an idiot. So if you're looking at a lot of this stuff and thinking, well, why didn't he do this? Or, he could have done this. Yes, I probably could have. And yes, I tried a lot of stuff behind the scenes that didn't make it into the video because there was a lot of footage for this 7-day challenge. But it's my experience. This is what I went through. I can only give you my personal experience. Yours may be completely different, but I can't document your experience. So overall, the Raspberry Pi works perfectly fine as a web browser, sending emails, maybe hop on a Zoom call. It's fine for that. For gaming, it sucks. Specifically the Raspberry Pi 4 on 64-bit Raspberry Pi OS. If you're gonna do gaming on it, when you want a desktop environment, go with the Raspberry Pi 3. There's a lot more stuff supported for that. Or just boot up RetroPie or something and do emulation. Don't even worry about a desktop operating system. Go straight for a emulation-based operating system. When it came down to content creation, that was a thing I thought was going to be absolutely awful. And the photo editing was kind of awful, but I'll chalk that up to me not being experienced in GIMP. I don't know if GIMP just sucks as a software compared to like Photoshop, but it honestly wasn't terrible in terms of an actual experience with the hardware. Video editing completely blew my mind. I thought it was going to be a miserable experience. I didn't even know if I was going to be able to edit it on there. I was prepared to load it up and do it in Premiere Pro on my Windows machine and be like, sorry guys, I had to at least get the video out there. But it by far exceeded my expectations when it came to video editing. If you make proxies for your footage, it's completely usable in kdenlive. But if there's anything I covered in this video that you want more information about, or just want me to do another video about, let me know down in the comments. I don't know exactly how long this video took to render yet, but I will put that down in the description below. It's probably a 30-minute video, so my guess is an hour and 30 minutes. We'll see. But that's it. If you like this video, if you like this type of challenge thing, let me know if there's another week-long challenge I can do. I have an iPad. That might be interesting. I have an NVIDIA Jetson Nano. Maybe do that. We'll see. But if you like content like this, please give the video a like. If you like tech in general, then please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.